Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then GravWell is the solution for you. GravWell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. GravWell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/securityweekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today. In 2017, an increasing number of companies reported they did not have effective insider threat detection methods. LogRhythm's UEBA solutions enable you to detect and neutralize user-based threats in real time, while built-in scenario and behavior-based analytics empower you to expose insider threats, compromised accounts, and privilege misuse. Visit LogRhythm.com to learn how their UEBA solutions can help you expand visibility and enhance detection capabilities. Domain tools help security analysts turn threat data into threat intelligence. They take indicators from your network, including domains and IP addresses, and connect them with nearly every active domain on the internet. Those connections drive risk assessments, help profile attackers, guide online fraud investigations, and map cyber activity to attacker infrastructure. Fortune 1000 companies, global government agencies, and leading security solutions vendors use the Domain Tools platform as a critical ingredient in their threat investigations and proactive defenses. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/domain tools. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, your contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observit combats insider threats by detecting risk activity, investigating in minutes, effectively responding, and stopping data lost. Give it a test drive at observit.com/securityweekly. Are you looking for high-performance data storage that's easy to use yet secure enough for the Department of Defense? Look no further. Racktop Systems gives business software-defined data storage complete with embedded compliance, security, and data encryption. Don't let cyber threats, regulatory demands, or the complexity and growth of your data overwhelm your business. Racktop's high-performance data management platform gives you the tools you need to address the most demanding data challenges. Think beyond storage. To learn more, visit racktopsystems.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. We talked about our Black Hat extravaganza enough in the previous segment. So let's jump right into the news, Jeff.
Let's do it.
I want to talk about Mimecast. They bought an Israeli startup called Solebit for $88 million cash. I haven't looked at the actual acquisition details. Likely we'll cover them on Monday on Business Security Weekly, but Solebit is a threat detection company. Apparently, they've done a lot of research into various threats that are out there without using signatures or sandboxing, according to the announcement. And I think this is a very strategic acquisition for Mimecast, as if you're providing email phishing protection. It's nice to know what's malicious and add that intelligence into your product, so the phishing emails should never land in users' inboxes, or maybe if they do, they get removed really quickly. But I think this is a good acquisition for Mimecast.
Yeah, I would agree with that at face value. Every little bit helps, right? And there's certain things that you would think in this day and age wouldn't, we'd be able to filter out or block at the perimeter. Not that there is such a thing as a perimeter anymore. I had not heard of Solebit. I would like to check them out a little bit more. Maybe we'll talk tomorrow about them on Paul's Security Weekly.
Right.
A little bit more, if not next week. Are you going to be? Not to sidetrack, but you mentioned Monday on Business Security Weekly. Does that mean you head to Vegas shortly thereafter that?
Yeah, we head out on Tuesday.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes. And then we'll try and record some shows while we're at DEF CON. We'll see how that goes. No promises. We're going to try.
We're going to try. That'll be fun.
Yes.
All right. Anyway.
Yeah. So Cofense, this is an interesting announcement. So Cofense also plays in the phishing protection space. They've announced that basically they're releasing the industry's first phishing-specific orchestration, automation, and response platform to help organizations identify and disrupt active phishing attacks in progress. And I think this, these two announcements certainly relate. And I think the question many of us in the enterprise ask is, do I want to go to one vendor and get a couple of things from them? Like, in other words, I'm going to go to Mimecast, I'm going to get some phishing protection. And oh, by the way, I'm going to get some additional threat intelligence and protection services bundled with that. Now, also a strategy that's employed in the enterprise today is I've got my phishing protection, I've got my threat intelligence, and then I've got a separate product or maybe my own integration between the two that's taking action based on certain things. Certainly, you could use a separate SOAR platform that's not category specific, right? It's got a lot of them today. The big players, Demisto, DF Labs, who's a sponsor, Swimlane. I mean, there's tons of them, right? There are more generic kind of orchestration, automation, and response platforms. I thought the Cofense announcement was interesting because it's very specific to phishing. So you got to start making some decisions of where you want your automation, orchestration, and response, right? Do you want that built into all of the products that you have, or do you want one SOAR platform that integrates with some of your other solutions and then integrates into your management tracking processes like a ServiceNow, for example? I think these are interesting decisions. I feel like the SOAR thing is a trend and a bandwagon that everyone's jumping on, and we're going to start to see some consolidation there and backing off on that messaging. I really think that organizations, probably the majority of organizations, will have SOAR as a separate platform that integrates closely with their kind of management style projects, like products like your inventory control, ticketing system, and management of your IT systems. And ServiceNow is doing this as well, right? They're trying to tout themselves as one-stop shopping. Like, hey, if you got ServiceNow, they also have a SOAR component or module that you can buy and tie the two together. I'm a big fan of that. I think that it works really well, especially if you have ServiceNow. And I really like that as a platform to manage your vulnerabilities too. I see a lot of organizations doing that very effectively. And I think as we've seen over time, the tracking that's built into your phishing, your vulnerability management, maybe your endpoint is too narrow of a focus, perhaps, but all decisions that you're going to probably have to make in your enterprise, especially today.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The first two articles that you select, as you said, there is sort of a trend or a theme emerging, and it's interesting. And I was going to try to go the whole show without mentioning PCI by name, but what I think, and not to say anything specific about PCI, but what I think is interesting for the enterprise is what motivates the enterprise company to buy security solutions in general is, if not for regulatory compliance requirements, which historically PCI probably being the leading purveyor of this is 1,000-point solutions, one for every major requirement and minor requirement. There's certainly a desire that I've seen from companies over the years to consolidate as much as possible. And even as you were describing it, it seems like that would be the answer, is to consolidate and have either fewer products that do more, or at least have the products that you have be able to integrate with one another so they can communicate more effectively. And what motivates the enterprise beyond regulatory and compliance requirements is the headaches they're going through because they're getting hit by these types of attacks. So I would find it interesting. I don't know how we could do this type of survey to find out how many enterprise companies have been hit by the actual multitude of phishing attacks and been bitten by it. And of course, ransomware, I guess, would be a subset of that, versus they've signed on for some of these security awareness training tools that do the phishing exercises to try to test your workforce, and have scored so poorly that they feel the need to do something more proactively because their employees don't seem to be getting the message. Maybe we'll do an informal survey of people that stop by and visit us next week in Vegas. But I'm curious as to what the motivators are beyond regulatory compliance, and I have to think it's because it's real time, it's reality, or is it?
Yeah, I also think with the phishing problem specifically, today there exist a lot of scenarios that you can automate really well.
Sure.
Domain tools, for example, I think that their shining use case is, well, if you observe an attempt or an attempted attack that is using phishing, you can dig into some of those domains and piece together some information that identifies like a whole other list of domains that are likely in control by the same attacker or attacking group, and block those before the attacks come at you, and do that automatically, right? Also, the automation that if you observe a phishing attack, whether a user reported it or some threat intelligence told you it was a phishing attack, I can go remove those emails from inboxes, right? So there's a lot of great automation and innovation happening with respects to email phishing, which again, we've got a webcast coming up with Endgame on that topic,
right?
But I think there's a lot of techniques that basically I look at when I get excited about technology. It's usually because I'm going down the thought process of, well, I really wish I had that when I was trying to protect XYZ organization that I worked for, 10, 15 years ago. So,
well, yeah, and just pivoting in my own head, I'm thinking, well, maybe why phishing attacks are so much in the news or a trend, or protecting against them is because are they the last best, or are they the current most common attack vector that threats are using? Because they are so successful, and you only have to get 1 out of 1,000 employees to bite and you've compromised. It'd be a good question. Maybe the next time Mr. Strand comes on the air, ask him from a pen tester's point of view, or any of our various guests and sponsors that do pen testing. Are phishing attacks the leading way, or one of the top 3 leading ways that real threats are trying to break into enterprises? And that's why the focus is on trying to stop phishing attacks.
Sure. FireEye had an announcement that its MalwareGuard is now using machine learning. I don't know how interesting that is. The announcement really doesn't give us very many insights that allow us to make decisions about whether this is a good thing, a bad thing, or somewhere in between. And of course, using that buzzword of machine learning, but they did make a product announcement. I'm sure we'll see more.
I don't want to pick on any particular vendor, but I would love to fast forward a year or 18 months and see what all these companies end up with that are claiming machine learning or AI, and they're really doing something innovative and different, or it's just a lot of buzz and the dust settles down and we see what's left. My knee-jerk reaction is, my eyes tend to roll back in my head when I hear yet another announcement about AI or machine learning.
Yep, I agree.
But that's the curmudgeon in me coming out, probably.
No, you're not alone in that. I think there's just a couple more I want to cover, Jeff. There are some duplicates in there. But SentinelOne has announced a partnership with Lookout, basically, marrying some endpoint protection technologies with some mobile integrations. So SentinelOne is the endpoint protection company. Lookout is, of course, in every press release, you're the global leader in whatever you do. They're the global leader in securing mobility, which, I think, makes sense to have this style of integration, as mobile devices are really just another endpoint, but very different technologies where there may be some type of integration between 2 different solutions providers that you're going to have to deploy in your environment to get that coverage.
Well, yeah, not just another endpoint. I mean, they have become more often than not, they're the primary endpoint for more
Right.
and more users these days. And I was recently involved in a project looking to lock down a mobile device for a very specific use case, but learned sort of hands-on just how extremely difficult it is
Hmm.
to lock down a mobile device, considering it as an endpoint to run a, let's say run a trusted, secure application. It sort of reminded me of the early days of desktops and the arguments that always used to happen with, why are it was primarily Microsoft. Why are they putting out operating systems with every feature turned on? Or even back in the Unix workstation days, why are all these silly services turned on and enabled? And
Right.
the answer was always because people want to plug them in and use them, plug and play.
Yep.
And I see a lot of that with mobile devices. People want to be able to do certain things with mobile devices. They want to use them for tethering. They want to have Bluetooth enabled, near field communications. They want to be able to transfer data on and off, primarily their music and their pictures maybe. But there's all sorts of data transfer and different ways to connect to a mobile device. But let's say you want to shut all that down and just use it as, just the phone or just use the phone carrier portion of it. Really, really hard to do.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jeff. I read an article, somewhat related to security. I mean, they didn't write it in that vein, and I didn't agree with their post, but they basically said I miss my iPod because back in the day, iPods, and Apple is discontinuing, I think, shuffles and nanos. Like they're getting rid of the traditional iPods, right? Because everyone should just have an iPhone, which is you were describing, right? It's like your Star Trek communicator. It's my phone. It's my instant messaging application. It's my music. It's my pictures. It's like everything all in one device.
I love it that you talk Star Trek wearing a Star Wars
That's
shirt.
right. I knew you'd appreciate that. And so what the author of this article was saying is that, they missed the days when it was just an iPod and I could put all of my music on it, even though it was encoded in crappy MP3s and didn't sound great. But I could put my whole music collection on it, and that was the point. And he made other valid points, such as, Steve Jobs really pushing for the user should click 3 times or less to get to their music, making it a great user experience, which I think was important, obviously pivotal to the iPod's success. And also that device didn't bug you, right? Like I don't get a text message on my iPod because they're, most models early on didn't have Wi-Fi or any other connectivity. And it kind of missed like, I can just have this one device. It's my music. It doesn't annoy me with all the other things that my phone annoys me with. And I can just sit and listen to my music. And I agree. Where the author, went completely wrong is he didn't talk about all of the other music players that are on the market today. Which have, a lot of capacity, external storage with SD cards, and also play much higher quality music today. And there's a lot of options in that space. I own a couple of like really high end ones, but there's lots of options for that. And I like having a device that's just for music. Now the device that I have has Bluetooth and Wi-Fi on it, and it runs Android, but it doesn't like get text messages or anything like that. The Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth are for streaming services, which the author talked about. Loathing the streaming services. And he's like, I want my music on the device. You can certainly do that too. And the Bluetooth feature is nice because you can pair with Bluetooth headphones or plug in to a lot of the devices today. So, but, from a security perspective, it's kind of interesting because, we kind of in that security vein talk about like, do we go back to having something for music, having a separate camera and not having everything all in one? Which breeds a lot of security, vulnerabilities because all of that functionality is in a device that's always connected to the internet.
Well, I mean, it just underscores the classic paradox of this whole industry. From the internet on, everything was designed to openly and freely and seamlessly, transparently communicate information back and forth in as many ways possible, in as many formats as possible, as fast as possible, and then you have to step back and say, oh, but we need to secure certain data sets and certain things, and it's just a variation on a theme, but it's this underlying paradox of this whole industry: open communication, limited communication. That's why we're all in business, though.
That's right. It's true. Very true. So there was an announcement that Endace, I think is how you say it, who's the world leader. See, I told you, every press release is global leader, yep. World leader in high-speed network recording, playback, and analytics hosting, and Ixia have partnered. And Ixia really, I believe, positions itself in the market today as you get our devices and we help you collect all that data and link it to your security tools, which I think is a valid approach, especially for larger enterprises as your network grows in both speed, capacity, and just having multiple remote offices, right? You need solutions like that. And they're partnering with, well, the world leader, of course, in a company that specializes in that high-speed networking. I think if you're in a larger enterprise, this is likely a challenge that you have, when we look at 10 gig networking and things like that. How do we do the analytics of it? And there are companies that specialize in that. And now a partnership between the two, which I think is, obviously makes a lot of sense based on their market position.
And I guess more specifically, they're talking about, and this, I always get jazzed when I see something talking about encryption, but they're talking about the pervasiveness of encrypted network traffic, and the reality of how if the traffic is encrypted, there's a lot of security monitoring technologies that are kind of rendered useless.
Absolutely.
So that they're trying to create a way where you can get all the benefits of the security monitoring tools by seamlessly. Again, it's got to be fast and it's got to be seamless. Be able to decrypt the traffic in a way that you're not compromising the traffic to begin with that you're trying to secure.
Right. Yeah, I go back and forth on that. I think it largely depends on several factors and requirements of the organization, things like what industry are you in, what are you trying to protect, how much is it worth, all those kinds of requirements-based questioning. And then you come down to do I need to decrypt everyone's traffic to accomplish my goals? And I think in some cases that's certainly valid, right? But I think in most cases you're probably okay without incurring some of that overhead and the cost, not just the face value cost, but the overall cost of doing that is pretty high. And I think there are probably a smaller number of companies that maybe meet those requirements. I could be wrong, but I don't know. I tend not to recommend to everyone hey, you gotta have a solution that decrypts all of your traffic so you can do analysis on it.
Well, and this might be a little curmudgeonly of me, but classically from an encrypting a signal perspective, which is the world that I came from, there was decisions that needed to be made on starting with what type of data and what data needs to be protected and when.
Right.
And we actually used to speak about 3 different types of securing the data when it was being transmitted, and we called it inline, online, or offline encryption. Offline encryption would be you're encrypting your data, so you have an encrypted file and then you send it no matter what. And this was, in those days, it was primarily a radio signal. We weren't talking internet traffic, but I think it conveys, whereas inline would be more like what we think of in terms of a VPN tunnel or an SSL connection, where the encryption is kind of happening on the fly, but it's not the data itself, it's the whole communication stream. And maybe I'm getting this backward between inline and online. It's been a few years. But online, in fact, I think that's online is an encrypted encrypted tunnel, whereas inline is you're encrypting the data right before you send it. It's kind of a near real-time type of thing. And then on the other end, of course, you're decrypting it so somebody can listen to it or read it type of thing. I think ultimately, we're always trying to keep things simpler. let's just encrypt everything network traffic wise, but maybe someday companies need to figure out, do we need to even encrypt the whole network?
Right.
And therefore we don't have to have the discussion of when and how to decrypt it so that our monitoring tools can work.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we need to isolate that data that is most sensitive and determine what does and doesn't need to be encrypted. And while that seems tedious and painful, maybe ultimately that's less tedious and painful and expensive and time consuming than some of these alternatives that we're considering in terms of the blanket coverage for everything in terms of the network.
Well, and I also think that risk needs to enter the equation as well, in that every system and or person or group that we allow to decrypt this traffic is also potentially increasing our risk, right?
Yep, absolutely. Well, there's variations to the risk. What data, is it sensitive or not? And what's the risk of this data being exposed versus that data being exposed, or this channel being exposed, or this network segment being exposed? But historically, we just try to blanket cover everything and make it all secure to the same level, same degree.
Right.
And we suffer the consequences of that.
Absolutely. Well, that rounds out the show for today. Jeff Mann, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly. Thank you to all of our listeners and viewers. And we'll see everyone next time, hopefully at Black Hat. Come see us. Thanks, everyone.